Vancouver is not just known as a filming hub for TV and film, hence the name Hollywood North. There is also a thriving film community. There are a few art house cinemas in the city that allowed everyone to experience film on the big screen, watch it together in a public space, and discuss them. One of these cinemas is the Cinematheque, which is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year. The main goal of the Cinematheque is to present essential cinema to Vancouver audiences as well as educate them about the art of cinema. Local experimental filmmaker Kurt Tugas opened the Cinematheque in 1972, where it began touring around local theaters in the city. The current building of the theater opened on March 28, 1986, and is considered as the first cultural hub for cinematic art in Canada. Before Sean Noe was the new artistic director at the theater, he was the creative director where he was known as the person that wrote the notes on the films that they were showing in their programs.
But I also am responsible for programming those films as well. So everything that you see on screen at the Cinematheque, well, not everything, majority of what you see has gone through me, essentially.
Oh yeah, now you have more curator control on that now since you're now the artistic director at the theater.
That's right, yeah, and I was a programmer. I was programming associate at the Cinematheque for about 6 years, working closely with the former executive and artistic director, Jim Sinclair, and then was promoted into the role of artistic director, earlier this year. I've been with the organization for 10 years in total.
The same as Al as well.
Yes, yeah, me and Al
for 10 years as well, yeah.
And the new executive director, Kate Laddish, prior to that, she was the managing director, and I've worked very closely with her for the last decade as well. So yeah, there's lots of roots with the organization in terms of the staff there.
On the other hand, head projectionist Al Reed also worked in the theater for at least a decade. He has a lot of experience projecting film in a variety of theaters.
I started training back in 1996, I guess, at the UBC Film Society. You could volunteer there, and first I became a manager, but we needed projectionists, and when I became a film booker there, I also ended up becoming a projectionist, just as a way to guarantee that the shows I was choosing were getting shown because we'd had enough people. And yeah, it's become a career for me. I've went on to work at Cineplex locations, and then I went on to work at the IMAX that used to be at Canada Place.
IMAX.
Yeah, which was a fascinating experience. It was the first 3D IMAX booth in the world. Very interesting place to learn, and then I came here as the head projectionist back in 2010.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's different. I mean, at the time, just the landscape of Vancouver, the cultural landscape of Vancouver was very unique in the late 60s and the 70s. It was unique for there to be an institution like the Cinematheque. We modeled ourselves at that time around the Cinematheque Française, in that it would not only be an exhibition space where you could view films, but also that it would be a repository for film as well, that it would collect films, that would educate about films. We also have a pretty robust library as well, so an academic space also to study film. And from that, we started, I guess born out of that was also our learning and outreach department. And it became very important for us to be able to teach filmmaking as well, to teach those tools about the film that those kinds of elements that people were seeing on screen, but also around media literacy and understanding what you're seeing. And I think that the Cinematheque was unique in that way, in that we were really trying to build a cultural hub of film culture within the city, which prior to that didn't exist.
So of course, the theater is kind of also like a museum too, where now, going to see these films, kind of have a learning experience about various filmmakers as well as various genres of cinema as well. Kind of like when I saw the Hirokazu Koreeda retrospective last year, which kind of made me appreciate more of his film. That's where I kind of saw you for the first time in person last year.
Yeah, it was great meeting you then. And yeah, I think that we kind of, as I explain it to people, we are kind of like a museum for film, in that we will dedicate, months to a particular filmmaker or national cinema's body of work, and really ensure that there's going to be a kind of a comprehensive understanding of that artistic perspective or that kind of like landmark impact on cinema. And it's another way that we can communicate to people that we're not showing, for instance, exclusively new films. We're about the history of cinema. And it's important to us that we present these kind of major retrospectives that will give you a better understanding of the history of cinema itself.
In the beginning of the 2010s, there was a balance between the number of screenings in both film and digital. Today, most screenings at the Cinematheque are presented on digital.
Well, it's changed quite a bit in the last 12 years. When I started here, we were showing close to half of our shows were on 35mm film, and now that's less than 10%, I would say. It varies from program to program. But yeah, we're showing mostly digital cinema packages, which all come on hard drives. But at the same time, everybody has to know how to project film because we had film print last night. We had a brand new projectionist running it, and it worked well. So because we are a Cinematheque, no format is ever dead to us, really. We still sometimes show silent films, which have their own challenges. And we just have to keep skilled in all the various formats that come around.
The Cinematheque is also home to the West Coast Film Archive, where film prints of films from BC and the rest of Canada are preserved. There is also a library consisting of publications about film and cinema that could be an inspiration for making a film or writing an essay about film art.
Collection right now, our own archive, and ensuring those works will remain preserved is of the utmost importance to the organization. And there's constantly new measures that we're exploring to be able to preserve those works.
The theater has an outreach program to educate students about filmmaking through screenings and workshops.
Right now, we're running a screening for a high school group. They're watching Korean film, The Host.
By Bong Joon-ho, who also made Parasite.
Yep, and learning about the theme for today is monster films. So earlier they watched The Fly, and they get a workshop on what the monster means symbolically and how it's evolved over time in use of horror films, and how the cinematography is used to evoke emotion, and sound and effects have evolved, for example. So it is a key part of our mandate here to educate.
Film is still thriving and new filmmakers are experimenting with it. How is the film community going to make sure that film will be preserved for future generations?
There's even been kind of a renaissance around that recently, where there's more filmmakers, more independent filmmakers actually, returning to celluloid film, shooting 16 or 35mm or even 70. The difference being, though, that even if they shoot that way, it's very rare for there actually to be release prints struck that would be exhibited as film. They're shooting on film, it has that wonderful kind of like that grain. It's got its own kind of like unique visual qualities, but then it's ultimately being converted to digital, and that's how it's being exhibited most often. It's very rare. It's very rare for us to receive a newly struck 35mm print of anything, and that includes classic films as well that were obviously shot on film. Almost exclusively now, those are going to be digital restorations that are going to be released digitally. Although the quality of those digital restorations and the quality of digital film and digital exhibition across the board has vastly improved over the last decade, let's say.
Film is a very powerful format for presentation. I would definitely choose a brand new film print over a brand new DCP. I've screened films that were both of those things, like the same film, Gun Crazy, we screened one year in 35mm, and the next year we screened it in DCP. I could tell the difference, but DCP has the advantage that it will age better than a film. It's not going to get specks, it's not going to get dirt, it's not going to get some damage here and there, and there is less chance of operator error affecting the presentation. It will always be the same. It's much more controlled. So people love it when we show film and we can show a good quality print. But we had a print come in the other day that was not in a showable condition, and we ended up questioning it with the distributor, and they realized they sent us the wrong print. They sent us a print that was out of commission. It was all the color had faded. It was just red, and they are shipping us the correct print right now. So there's always a lot of quality control rules on here, looking at things in advance, making sure it's correct, and making sure we got what we asked for. Well, I think it exists as a place for people who love that wide expanse of filmmaking, independent foreign films, experimental, to see these films with an audience presented in the proper way that they appreciate. We have an audience that really loves this place, and they really come out to see a lot of films. We've had people who used to get an annual membership, and they would come see almost every film we programmed, which is amazing and shows their love for this place. And I think it is really important to have such a gathering place for the people. And I think, as much as care we take into programming and presentation, a lot of it is also the audience. I have been to other screenings recently at Cineplex, and the projection looked great, the sound looked great, but the audience was half teenagers talking through the film, taking out their cell phones and texting, and you just don't see that at a Cinematheque audience. So I think that's part of what makes it special, is that you are surrounded by people who care about the film like you do, and it's put on screen by people who care about the film. And I think really it's the caring that's the important thing.
Unlike the popcorn at Cineplex, the popcorn in an art house cinema, including the Cinematheque, has real butter, and you can also put a variety of seasonings on it. Maybe even put chocolate-coated raisins in it.
Small popcorn with butter. And a drink?
Can I get a couple more?
Sure. Where's the small?
Usually my popcorn, I put spike and a lot of hot sauce on top of it, as well as other seasonings sometimes. Currently, the Cinematheque is showing two major retrospectives, one celebrating the 100th birthday of French director Alain Resnais, and the other celebrating the early years of British filmmaker Mike Leigh. At the same time, they're also showing the European Union Film Festival both in person and online.
Resnais 100 is coming as well. Yeah, both of those will be happening in December. Very excited. I've been looking for an opportunity to do this centenary celebration for Alain Resnais all year, obviously. I'm getting it in like just under the wire, but it's very exciting that we're able to do it. And both of those series include brand new restorations of works. In the case of the Mike Leigh, all 8 films that we're presenting are all new restorations.
All new restorations, like 4K restorations of all those films?
I'm not sure about the K. I mean, I'll say that, I mean, the Cinematheque can only do, at this time, we can only actually exhibit 2K. So even when we receive restorations that are in 4K or above, you're seeing it in 2K at the Cinematheque. But yeah, I think, I mean, Janus Films, which is a boutique distributor out of the States, their sister company's Criterion, who has the channel and does the Blu-rays. They typically do restorations between 2 and 4K. So I'm assuming those Mike Leighs would be the same, but I'm not sure of the specifics.
Well, that makes me like to see, well, Life is Sweet in the theater. I saw that on the DVD, so I'm probably going to want to see that in the theater to see the new restoration of that film.
Yeah, and I should note that the retrospective starts with, or kicks off with Naked, which is a very provocative film, but many deem it to be Mike Leigh's masterpiece. And Bruce Sweeney, who's a Vancouver-based filmmaker, kind of veteran Vancouver-based filmmaker now, he is kind of a proponent of the Mike Leigh method in terms of this improvisational rehearsal period with actors. And he's going to be introduced, and he's going to be introducing the retrospective on its opening night.
I went to Life is Sweet, which I saw, and I thought, oh, that was great. I'll check out this guy's film, then I'll go to this workshop. There was an opening, and it was interesting that most people, in fact, all directors that I knew of at that time, they all did the same thing. They all started with the script. You write pen on paper, you get 100 pages, 110, you go to camera, and that's your script. Mike Leigh doesn't do that. He's got a different approach. He sort of conceives it, and it's based upon improvisation. Now, every time you hear improvisation, you think, well, what does that mean? Well, he he sort of laid it out for us in this workshop. And when he's doing a feature, he starts with 4 pages, and the pages have just a number of ideas. And from these pages, he devises scenarios, and then he brings in the actors. And so he tells the actors, he gives them a direction, and these improv start. And I also learned that, you know, filmmaking, it's not just about you. It involves a bunch of other people. And so the actors, with very spare direction, just took off and gave it their own kind of punch and their own kind of flavor. Later, I had a film in Sydney Film Festival, and he was in with Career Girls, and I guess someone told him in the catalog, whatever, there's a little thing saying that I was influenced by Mike Lee, and so he came to my screening, and he said nice things to me, and he sort of looked at me when he first came out, and I could see him squint his eyes, and it was clear he had no idea who I was, because he must have given 100 of these things, right? It's just another guy. But then he said, "You're full of good ideas. I like your Q&A. Do you want to go for lunch?" And I thought, do I want to go for lunch? Do I want to go for lunch with freaking Mike Lee? Yes, I do.
In the new year, they will show the Hong Kong cop blockbuster film series The Infernal Affairs trilogy, which recently was released in a Blu-ray box set by the Criterion Collection. It also inspired Martin Scorsese's 2006 Academy Award-winning film The Departed. There will also be retrospectives on Canadian filmmaker Guy Maddin, Noboru Schwa, and the conclusion of a series on BC history on film, The Image Before Us. It includes a screening of Edward S. Curtis's documentation of Indigenous peoples in BC with In the Land of the Headhunters. French New Wave director Jean-Luc Godard passed away recently from assisted suicide. The reason why he did is that he was unhappy with the state of film today, although he leaves behind a legacy that set the standard for what would be modern cinema today.
I mean, yeah. I mean, Jean-Luc Godard is an absolute legend, an absolute pillar in terms of cinema just tout court. There was definitely kind of before and after Breathless. I think he was responsible for a seismic shift in terms of film aesthetics and approaches to visual storytelling and metatextual elements of cinema. Yeah, he's one of the key kind of modernists in cinema, and I mean, many, obviously people go back to his incredibly influential period throughout the 60s, before he probably started doing the more agitpop propaganda-like political films. But I've been a fan of his work through his various stages, including his kind of return to cinema that happened in the 80s, and was deeply moved and incredibly impressed by his most recent works as well. The Image book in particular, I think, is an absolute masterpiece. So it's a real shame that we won't get more works out of that that iconic filmmaker.
Beginning in March, the theater will be closed for major renovations, especially on the washrooms. When the theater reopens in May, the next 50 years of essential cinema in Vancouver begins. As long as people still care about film, the Cinematheque will still thrive in the next 50 years.